You guys to go. It has to go. It has to go.
Did they hang him?
He committed suicide.
How they rob him? I think it's because he's blue. I think it's because he's blue. They hung him.
Alright, take seat.
Wherever the lady stands for pledge allegiance and among the time. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a moment of silence. We have quite a few announcements this morning, so here we go. The Balfour representative will be here today from Florida 6:30. Y'all hold on, I'll be right back.
No, you're not my mom.
I would have went. Yeah. So nice.
Yes, you didn't go to school.
Dance what? All I do is have to prepare my checkbook with the thing at school.
Sorry, I had a panic moment there. Okay, we have quite a few announcements this morning. The Balfour representative will be here today from 4 to 6:30. That's if you want to purchase any, senior stuff, a leather jacket, or if you want to finish paying off your ring. The ring ball is tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. You must have your ring paid off by 12 tomorrow. One more time, the ring must have to be paid for by 12 tomorrow for you to get it tomorrow night. Okay. CSA students attending Tech Day at the Perry Fair, October the 10th, needs to see Mr. Johnson, that's Brent Johnson, to pick up your paperwork. The BCHS trunk or treat is Thursday, October the 27th. See Ms. Jessica Johnson if you would like to participate or help. Basketball cheer tryout sign-ups are until Tuesday, October the 4th. Sign-up is Jessica Johnson's door, which is 1503. You must have an updated physical by the 14th to be eligible for tryout. One more. The PDIS October Word of the Month is responsible is, and the definition is, responsibility is having an obligation to do something or having control over or care for someone as part of one's job or role. That's just part of it. We'll get the rest of it tomorrow. Everybody have a great day.
Good job, Rich. 5 minutes. Delay. I'll take that. Anybody else have this? I will do some work for you by getting them to Ms. Williams.
What is that?
PSAT. It's the PSAT. Yeah, because you're gonna ride on a bus. It's your permission to ride on the bus.
I don't even know what he's talking about.
You work on. See if I have extra of those. Team, I'm not sure I have an extra one of those. I will get it for you. Fatima needs one.
Right here when we got it.
You were gone like 2 consecutive days, right? Two
Oh,
days.
that was the whole
2 days. That's a lot. Yeah. You were gone how many days? About that many.
Well, we didn't come Thursday or
All right.
Friday.
I will get an extra for you. Are you FCCLA? Are you in FCCLA? Okay. So you probably, it conflicts with the
But she's
FCCLA.
supposed to too, so. Are you going to?
What I'm saying is, yeah, the Trinity, you tell her.
No, I'm going with both.
Okay, I will get you a bus permission form, Fatima, and you can decide where you're going. It does conflict with the FCCLA day. That's just kind of is what it is. I didn't plan either of them.
No, I'm going Friday
You're going.
to the pep rally, to the fall rally.
We'll talk.
This Friday?
Fatima, you missed 3 days. You don't even know what direction's up anymore.
It's 2.
That's why you gotta be at school. Hey, take the Teddy Roosevelt article that you have in front of you. That'll be for later. So some of you already know the TR. That's fine. That article will be for a little bit later. Pull out this. Okay, we've been working on it all week, and today we got some work to do because we are doing front and back of that last page. Okay. Obviously, it was a surprise to not see you at the end of last week. We didn't have the information till fourth block, so I got to set fourth block up. I was like, hey, I won't see you again. Here's what you should do. You all, I'm sure that you did all the right things in your days off and checked Google Classroom and saw the bonus points opportunity that was posted. All that. Question? The test, yes. So here's the deal. The test Friday was going to be an activity that unfortunately we're just going to kind of have lost. It's one of those things where we take notes up to the point of having the activity, and that kind of makes it feel worthwhile. Unfortunately, we missed 2 whole days. Quite frankly, we didn't need to, but when we miss 2 whole days, it's going to cost something, and in this case, it's going to cost an activity. I'm not even going to tell you what it was because we might still do it in the future. On, let's say there's a Friday that there's short and block. Like, we might still fit this activity into the future. We just, unfortunately, it cost it to us this time. Monday, today's learning, tomorrow's review, Wednesday's test. I was going to have 2 days of review, and quite frankly, that's a lot of review. So it works. Yeah, we had a padded day in there as it was. Today's learning, tomorrow's review, and that means that the test is still on Wednesday. You already had, I'm kind of proud of myself for doing this. You already had your study guide scavenger hunt. Whether you did it or not, that's kind of on you, but you didn't have it. It's not due today, of course. All this will be due on Wednesday. So if you look at this, you should recognize what I'm talking about. The 3 I's, Indians, inventions, and immigrants. Gilded Age notes, that's what we're still working on. So it's Gilded Age and Progressivism, but it's that stapled set of notes. And then the study guide scavenger hunt is what I just referred to. Those are the 3 turn-ins on test day. We've kind of become accustomed to that. If we don't turn in on Friday, we turn in on test day. And of note, the bonus point opportunity has already been posted. It is the same as the past. America, the Story of Us. There are 2 episodes. You may take notes on the episodes. You may use your notes on the bonus questions. The 4 of you that have done it every time, 1 have gained, how many tests we had? 3? You gained 5 bonus points per test. So you've gained 15 test bonus points. That's a lot inside of your test score. You've also gained a rich learning experience by having watched America, the Story of Us. So if you've been watching, I hope you will keep on watching. If you haven't watched to this point, it's fine. You could just start right now. You don't have to start at the beginning. You can start with the episodes that are posted right now. That is I'll give this to you, like this is perspective. I can't imagine giving away free test points. I can't imagine turning them away from your perspective. Like, oh wow. Sometimes I get twisted on a test. Is it A or is it C? But this is something I can control. I can watch these episodes and I can get these 5 essentially free bonus points by doing little work. So that's what I give to you, okay? They are essentially free bonus points as long as you do some work for me. And Jackson, have the episodes been pretty on track with class? Have the episodes enlightened you to context that then fits into the exam? Much more than the exam, also life. So there's a lot there, and I hope that this crowd in particular, okay, I know I'm talking to the honors class, this crowd in particular should embrace that extra learning. I would hope so. And anyway, speech complete. If you're doing the bonus points, you're earning some extra love. And if you're passing on it, it's no skin off my nose, and you're not offending me either. A little bit, not too much. Okay. Hey, how about that football game on Saturday?
Listen,
Were you there?
before we talk about I need the notes. All of them.
Okay. Catch me in our bathroom break, and I'll hand you our stuff, okay?
There was a fight.
I'm about to fall down. Catch me in our bathroom break, Fatima, and I'll give you all the stuff you need. Yeah, Delaney, how about that football game?
Fight.
There was a fight. Tell me about that fight.
It was 38-39, and the referees had called a fumble, and Devin had told me this, but there was touching up hands. Good game.
Okay.
They weren't saying the game though.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden they just broke out to a fight. Devin said he wasn't going to get into it until they tried to go after the coach.
Okay.
So whenever someone tried to go after the coach, Devin slammed.
Devin Perez?
Yeah.
That's my boy. Okay. Cool. Delaney, you there? No. Who'd you get that from?
Devin.
From Devin? Devin was there, right? I know Devin was there. So what kind of sources that make Devin?
Secondary.
Primary.
Kind of sources that make Devin?
Primary source.
Devin is a primary source.
But I'm the secondary.
You are at best a secondary source. This is true. This is true. So I'm using Saturday's football story to kind of remind us about some sourcing. Okay, this is extra because it happened and it's too rich to pass up. Delaney walked right into my example here by telling the story. Now, she didn't try to claim she was there. She didn't. But she spoke pretty authoritatively, wouldn't you say? Delaney, you feel pretty confident about those facts?
Yeah.
Delaney, what was the score?
38-39.
38-39. It was 28-29. I was there. It was 28-29. Oh, okay. So I'm tweaking your facts a little bit. Delaney, what really set up that scuffle in the first place?
We were angry.
We were angry about what? About losing? Why'd we lose?
I mean, they lose almost every single game.
Ray, what did you hear? Ray, what did you hear?
I heard they were lined up at the end zone and like the other team jumped off sides or something, but maybe the refs thought they snapped it already and then they fumbled it. But they said the people I talked to said nobody snapped it.
I've heard from the same source of radio.
Can y'all say it a little louder?
Say it a little louder for Fatima. Like, you know, Jack, so Ray gave his shot. Jackson said, say a little louder for Fatima.
I talked to the same person that Ray did, so I can verify what Ray's saying is true. They said
Okay.
that they were going to, defense jumped off sides. The refs thought they snapped the ball and the center missed it, so they picked the ball up and scored.
Okay.
Something like that.
Were you there?
I was not there.
Yeah. So heard it from a friend who heard it from a friend. Who's your source?
Travis called.
Was Travis there?
Travis was
Okay. He was what?
He's a player.
He's a player. Okay. So where was he standing? What was his perspective?
I believe on the
I
side.
say it, but probably side.
Right. No. That's fine. I said he's on silent. But at what angle? What angle?
He don't-
He was on the field. He was on the field. Like he was on the line. Like he was a part of the play.
He was on the sideline.
Oh, he was on the sideline. Okay, yeah, that's right. You said he's on the sideline. So here's why I asked that. Depending on where you were, really affected your angle of that play. Okay? Now I, as a primary source in the stands, will tell you my perspective briefly, and I am walking us through a bit of a review. My world historians maybe remember a couple of these screens and the conversation we've already had. And of course, I like to throw in stuff like this all the way along the way. So I hope you recognize what we're talking about. What does a historian always seek to answer? The 5 W's. When we're doing history, we observe first, then and only then interpret. So I'm kind of in the observation stage, right? She got it from a player. Y'all got it from the same source, but you weren't there. I was there. Let me tell you what I saw. You know what I saw? I was there when I see it because I was looking in the direction. But what if I started to say, oh, I was there. Let me tell you what happened. And then I proceed to tell you like that, my eyewitness account. But in my heart of hearts, let me be honest, y'all, I was looking the other direction at the moment of the snap. So I can't tell you what happened. I was there. You might consider me a primary source, but cannot honestly, I'm being honest with you, right? Some people might try to build the story up and be like, oh yeah, I saw it. I'm telling you, I was looking the other way. So am I an eyewitness? I really can't say that I am because I saw the after effects. I saw the scuffle. Now, I don't know exactly how it started because that was also muddled by angles and perspectives. So here's what I'm giving you. Here's what I'm trying to give you. Just because someone was there, can we fully trust their testimony? No. Just because someone was a so-called primary source, are they always saying the right thing? That's what I hope we'll get out of this, right? And I'm just elaborating on Saturday afternoons happenings. I could pick many different examples, potential, across time and history. But this one's kind of close to us. Y'all talk to a buddy, he's pretty invested, right? He's pretty emotional about it. You talk to a guy who's a football player as well, same story. There were maybe 800 people who could honestly say that they were present, right? A lot of times people like to have been at a game after something amazing happened. Oh yeah, I was there, I saw that Hail Mary. Weren't you at the house? You left in the third quarter, right? A lot of people add their perspective to something, or they want to have witnessed something even if they weren't actually there. So I'm telling you, there's about 800 people who could honestly say they were there. But of those 800, David Swanson himself is saying that I didn't really see it. So just because you're in the room doesn't mean that you actually saw it. So we already kind of talked, we hit this primary source. A secondary source would be a newspaper that maybe compiles witness statements. At this point, Jackson, Delaney, Ray are secondary sources. At this point, I'm kind of making all of you secondary sources by giving you my perspective. I'll pass by that slide right there, examples of sources we've already seen. All right, this is the play. And I have this on a repeat, so let's just go ahead and watch it, different speeds and all that. So here's what happened. I'll just let you watch it through, and then I'll tell you a little bit more. That's the push into the end zone. Now watch the referees.
What?
All right, I made it into a GIF. It's not really that good. Let me pull up the video. Let me pull up the video as well.
What?
All right, so here's what I'm doing now, and forgive me, it's first block. I'm always ironing some stuff out. This is from our Bacon County videos. So on one perspective, you might have to consider that it is ours, right? When you hear the announcer speaking, you have to consider that it is our speakers. Okay, it's Mr. Hayes, Mr. Joe. That's one thing to think about. The other thing to think about is the angle, the quality, and you know how much you can or maybe can't see. So here's what I'm going to show you. I'm going real deep on this example because I want you to really grab primary sources. Here's the setup. At this point, it is 22 to 28. From a sports perspective here, what we should be doing is taking knee, right? Take a knee and let the clock run out. However, they had timeouts. So every time we take a knee, they're able to burn a timeout and stop the clock. It gets to the point, this is third down. It gets to the point where they could theoretically force a punt. Now, they're going to have about 7 seconds left on the clock. That's not that much time to do something with the ball, but there is still a chance. So you're telling me there's a chance, I'm telling you there's a chance. So here's what's going to happen. They are going to try to jump the snap. They're going to try to push as soon as the ball is snapped and either force our guy into the end zone for a safety, or if they can force a fumble and recover it, that would be a touchdown. Okay, that's the setup. That's the setup. What we think happened, I'm just saying, I'm not trying to, stoke any fires, and in my third block, I got some football players, so this will be an interesting conversation. What we think happened is that we didn't snap the ball. If we didn't snap the ball and they started to play, well, sports people, what is that? That's a penalty. It's offside. You can't do that, okay? Inside the game, there are some rules you got to follow. One of those rules is the ball has to be snapped. If we didn't snap the ball, that's obviously a penalty. Here's where it gets muddled. Everyone on our line is going to swear we didn't snap the ball, right? Let's be honest. Our perspective, our team, us versus them, we're going to say we didn't snap the ball. People in the stands on our side go swear we snapped the ball. People wearing white jerseys, what do they think happened? They're going to think we snapped the ball. They're going to start calling their own touchdown. The guys in the white and the black jerseys, referees, what do they think happened? Well, to this minute, I'm not sure that they know. Okay, and I'm not trying to get into any rules of GHSA or anything like that. But to this minute, I'm not sure that they know what happened. In the midst of the chaos, the person closest to the play, the person literally responsible for making the right call, isn't sure what happened. Now let's expand this to history. Can we see how certain historical events can become very confusing? Yes. Right? All right, now let's watch it. Let's watch this. Let's actually see what happens. And pay attention to the graphic I put on the video. Here's why it becomes confusing. Or you're going to see why it becomes confusing. Here we go.
We're under center. We're under center.
Watch the arrow. What moves? It's hard to tell, isn't it?
It's leg.
It's hard to tell. Is it a leg?
That should be.
Is it a shadow?
Yeah. What? They're saying touchdown. Hold on.
Knox has an
What in the
opinion.
world?
Coach Wilson has an
What?
opinion.
They're saying touchdown. Lawrence.
What do you think Knox is saying? I'm going to ask him next block. I'm going to find out from the primary source. All right, so I'll show you one more time. And here's what I want you to pay attention to. Guys, to this minute, I'm not sure. Now, I've way overanalyzed this, both as a sports fan and as kind of prepping this primary source conversation. I can't tell what's happening here. I honestly can't. Keep your eye on the ball, But the problem is that the East Lawrence player starts dancing in front of him. Okay, so you can try to keep your eye on the ball. Now he's not on purpose trying to obscure the video. He doesn't know the video is happening. But as it comes down to this being our only replay available, it's really hard to keep your eye on the ball. In the moment of the movement, it is I can't tell if it's a shadow, a body part, or the ball movement. This is why it's confusing. This is why you can have eyewitnesses. This is why you can have people literally there present on the ground. You can have a referee who is supposed to keep order of the conversation, and we can't decide what happened. So I'll let you see it one more time, and I'll make so I'll go back. I can't see my own mouse there. So the arrow, watch the arrow. The arrow is going to point at a kind of a grainy version of the ball. What I think is the ball, and pay attention to it. Here we go.
The other center.
That was the ball.
Yeah, they grabbed it.
No, that was the ball. That was the ball.
Yes, but they grabbed it.
You can see the little brown that goes round it. That's
Yes,
the ball.
but they grabbed it.
To this minute, I'm not sure. So I'm not trying to open any wounds from our sports players. I'm certainly not being disloyal to the Raiders by trying to find out the truth, right? I was as mad as anyone else about several calls in that game. But I want to give this to you as a historian. We can take this small high school football example, and we can see how. Do you think everybody agreed on the causes of the Civil War?
No,
Do you think everybody understood the fight for independence?
no.
Do you think that civil rights and the actions inside of that movement, which we haven't talked about yet, is going to be agreed upon by everybody?
Nope.
Thank you, Fatima and Delaney, for talking to me today. We can see how it gets muddled. Okay, we can see how it gets muddled. It gets muddled to the point that these two jokers who are supposed to know what they're calling on the line can't even agree. If these two zebras can't agree on what to call, when they're literally focused on a single play, how in the world can we, from 185 years later, fully agree on something that happened in history? So I went all in on making this point. Obviously, spent a lot of time. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah, he's calling safety.
That's right. So one is calling a safety, which would mean the Red Raiders kept the ball, but got tackled in the end zone. The other is calling a touchdown, which is to say East Lawrence recovered the ball in the touchdown. We literally can't agree on what happened. Those guys, those are bystanders, right? In history, aren't those bystanders who are like, I'm not sure I'm going to make a call here, right? Anyway, all right, I went all in on this little situation here, just trying to make the point to you. Not even what we need to talk about today. Here's what I want to give to you. Now, I know I don't have any football players here, but this is a statement from Henry V, which is a play. Did it get said like this on the battlefield of St. Crispin's? Probably not. But here's a really powerful statement that comes from Shakespeare, and he says, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. And gentlemen in England who are in their beds right now shall think themselves accursed that they were not here. Hold their manhoods cheap while any speaks who fought with us on St. Crispin's Day." So I know I don't have any football players in front of me, but listen, those guys who lived it, it's very raw, very real, very emotional to them. And you can't take away from them the fact that their blood, sweat, and tears was on that field. That's why the perspective goes like this. So they should be proud of what they fought for on that particular day. And I'll give you one more, which will feed into our conversation of the day. This is Theodore Roosevelt, who we will be talking about today. He has a very famous quote called "The Man in the Arena," and he says this. I won't read the whole thing. "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena." What he's saying is there's always going to be the spectators who point, who critique the quarterback or the Monday morning quarterback or the armchair quarterback, however you want to say it. There's always going to be that referee in the stands who knows he saw it better. Those referees, I poke at them by calling them zebras a little bit. They're the ones on the ground doing the best they could. Our players, we can back think about how they should have handled those last few plays. They were the ones on the ground doing it. So let's remember that it's not the critic who counts, but the man in the arena who's actually doing the blood, the sweat, and the tears. Theodore Roosevelt, perfect segue into our actual conversation for the day. We're at our bathroom break, which means when we come back, we got some work to do, but I hope that that's kind of illuminating from a historical perspective.
In soccer, when we go against Africa.
Really?
Yeah.
I saw the young
Oh, we don't play Or just-
I checked the boys before I let Mackenzie's class go in,
Okay.
but I think there's a sub in there.
Oh,
So
okay.
she may not know to check it. I don't know.
Okay, I will.
What is no? I just do.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, right. If I had the Raiders won, that would have been the first time I could think there was that Georgia Tech, the Falcons, and the Raiders won at the same weekend. And the Braves.
Ladies. My lady. All right. So I kind of went all in on that first analogy. Hopefully it was worthwhile to you. Don't go tell anyone I'm picking at the team. We're looking at the perspective of, truth, fact, and everything in the middle. So, all that said, we definitely need to get going on where we're going. And what we're going to talk about today is Theodore Roosevelt from the lens of both progressivism and imperialism. So I told you, we've been looking at the president's wall. We haven't seen a single president in this era yet. Gilded Age, onto, that was creepy. That was like Michael Myers looking through the window. Oh, you get locked out.
That's your
I knew it. I knew it,
foreshead,
yeah. All right, you go ahead and wipe that one down later. So we're gonna look at the man, the myth, the legend, Theodore Roosevelt, aka Theodore Rex, aka one of the more interesting presidents and the only president of this era that we're actually gonna spend time talking about. We're gonna do front back notes today, so that's as far as we're going. And all that said, let's go ahead and get there. So first of all, nope, that was the other Roosevelt. That was the other Roosevelt. She makes a great book there,
Hey,
and I'll.
you gave me the notes?
I can give you the notes. This one. This one. There we go. You can, go ahead. I'll tell you later. All right, we're going to start with a couple of definitions, and of course, I'm going to weave it into the story. So first of all, imperialism, aka expansionism. From that word alone, what do you think it means? As a national policy, what would be expansionism?
To spread their beliefs and everything, or their country, religion, whatever.
I like several things that she said. Spread is very true. Beliefs, values of your country. Delaney, that's very good. Who wants to add to that? Can add to that. I'm just waiting for the magical definition, right? Delaney, pretty good. The idea that the U.S. should spread its beliefs by acquiring lands in other parts of the world. So that the heart of the definition is about acquiring other lands. But what Delaney said is exactly right. It's about spreading our beliefs, our culture. It's about believing that we have the best way to do life figured out. Democracy is best. Capitalism is best. We kind of become this world policing power. It's very interesting because we, at one time, rebelled against a world policing power, i.e. the British Empire. So this is one philosophy. Not everybody is going to agree with it. And of course, I'm going to show you the other side of that here in just a second. But imperialism, the idea that the United States should spread its wings, its philosophy, its economy, its government style, as in democracy, to other parts of the world. Looking at the picture there, what do you think the picture implies about imperialism?
People building up their supplies, giving them amendments, making them look big.
Okay. Yeah. So the American soldier is definitely the central figure, and everyone else is kind of subservient to him. Might have some East Asian fighters as well as politicians. Delaney, pretty good, pretty spot on. So if imperialism implies expanding, what do you think the opposite theory would be? Let me see. Someone I haven't heard. Coleman. I haven't heard from Coleman in a while. Coleman, what do you think the opposite theory is? Okay, so he says it's on my page, and it's called isolationism. So break that word in half. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me finish this one out. My bad. So why expand? Because it gives the U.S. landing areas. That's how I want you to think of it. Landing areas for military bases, trade, and just power in general. Okay, so kind of the things I said. My bad that I didn't show the slide. Why do we want to expand? So that we can have access to these different things around the world. Think of it as like a lily pad. If a frog wants to go across a pond, talked about frogs several times already in this class, right? Last time we boiled one. If a frog wants to go across a pond, he can do that by hopping from lily pad to lily pad. Well, think about hosting our flag in different ports in different countries around the world. Gives us a launch point or a landing area for all of these things. Ports, our water, our trade, our money. Airstrips are for planes, are for military, it is for access. These are reasons that we want to expand. And I love the picture, planting our flag all over the world, right? We think about when you go to, you guys are familiar, of course, we went to the moon and we planted our flag on the moon. Imagine this like planting our flag all over the world. That's expansionism. This political cartoon is pretty telling. So far left-hand side, I don't know if you can see the year, it says 1783. What was going on, Trinity, in 1783? What was our status as a country? Yeah, total infancy, because 1783 was the end of the Revolutionary War, right? So that is the beginning of our independent, governance as a country. Totally a baby country. Are we proud of ourselves for winning the war? Sure. Are we experienced in self-governance? Not yet. So we're not going to break apart each new Uncle Sam, but take our, what is the progression really showing?
He is really big. Bad.
Okay, so he's growing. He's an adolescent. He's a teenager.
He changed his hat to the USA.
Okay, that classic representation of Uncle Sam. So the really fat one, Delaney. What do you think?
Ship.
He's holding a ship. Okay, so what is the really fat one? And the year is 1899. This is where we are now. Okay, the story of us, 1899. What does the really fat Uncle Sam probably represent?
USA.
The USA, and well, the fact that he's fat.
The government.
Let me see if we can hear from Eric. Greed. Okay, let me hear from Landon. Landon, why do you think he's so fat? Gobbled up a lot of different lands. Yeah. What once was an infant new country just focused on us is now expanded around the world. Delaney, I like that you noticed the ship because we now have a fleet that does sail around the world. A powerful navy. So all of those representations can kind of be seen on this progression of Uncle Sam there. Here's a present day showing of U.S. expansionism. Okay, I always like to bring it to the present day. Here is where the United States military has bases in the world today. Definition just said landing areas for military power and for trade. So look at the graph here. You can see that yellow is a base. Orange is exactly what I said, kind of like a lily pad. That could be as small as an airstrip. It could be a single port. It might just be the single embassy in that country. It says fewer than 200 people at that particular lily pad. And then, blue is unconfirmed. And, listen, I'm not going to act like I got some secret information just because I was in the military. I don't know all the countries that we're in, but I can understand that every now and then there's a safe house that isn't exactly published, but we still have a foothold in that particular country. So looking at the map here, where are we represented pretty heavily?
Italy.
Okay, Italy, yeah, what continent is that? Europe, pretty heavy presence in Europe. What about another continent with pretty heavy presence?
Japan.
Okay, you're right, Japan, Delaney. I mean, there are some large bases in Japan, and you might make the connection that we've been there ever since World War II. What about Africa? No major bases, but we have a presence in almost every African country.
Right there.
Where are we not?
Russia.
Yeah, don't have any presence in Russia or China. So you can see that while we are spread pretty far across the globe, there are some blacked out spaces for sure. And, that kind of makes sense based off of the world situation. Well, the opposite of that then, so I'll beat myself to the punch. Coleman, contrast that with isolationism. What do you think a good working definition of isolationism might be? Hey, one side is let's spread ourselves all across the world. The other side is, wait a second, shouldn't we take care of ourselves first? Shouldn't we protect our own land and our own interests? Shouldn't we limit our interactions with other countries? Not try to have interactions, but limit our interactions. And by the way, immigration, not everyone coming to our country probably wants to be here for good reasons. Let's limit immigration. I'm not saying all those statements are right. I'm saying that's one full philosophy. Expansionism versus isolationism. And I think it's pretty easy to understand by just breaking those words down by themselves. You can see the posters that I have on this particular screen here. Keep us out of war. Be neutral. That would be a big philosophy of an isolationist. Keep us, U.S., keep us out of war. America first has become a motto that's kind of re-entered the American lexicon, political landscape today. So this is isolationism, sometimes called nativism. That is to say, this is our native land and we should take care of ourselves first. So these are the two big working philosophies that we're going to have to deal with today as we talk about Teddy Roosevelt and imperialism overall. So do I see some pencils still moving? I want to make sure I gave everybody time to get there. So I said I went all in on Theodore Roosevelt, but first we need to talk about the man who preceded him in office, and that is William McKinley. Now, William McKinley doesn't make it onto our wall, but we do have to understand him in order to understand Roosevelt. So McKinley, he's got kind of an interesting story. He is considered a progressive president. He is the opposite of the hands-off, laissez-faire. Now, he's actually a really good blend of pro-business as well as helping the laborer, okay? So he's not straight up hands-off, laissez-faire like we talked about last week, but he's also not all into business and regulation to the point of kind of handcuffing how they do their operations. So he is a nice middle ground as a future progressive president. A little bit about him. He is the last Civil War veteran to be president. So you could say it's kind of like the last of a generation. Every future president after that did not serve during the Civil War. He gets his experience as he was a governor of Ohio. He is a Republican, and he defeated kind of a young up-and-comer, a Democrat named William Jennings Bryan. So the fact that the old man defeated the young up-and-comer showed that the country still valued experience, still kind of was hanging on to that Civil War generation a little bit. And then, like I said, he's kind of that bridge between pro-business and pro-labor. He does oppose monopolies. He sees them as bad for America, but he doesn't exactly bust them up. He opposes them. He doesn't think that they're good, but he doesn't go so far as to bust them up with excessive legislation overall. So that's William McKinley, a little bit of a setup here. A couple of his imperialist policies. So we just defined imperialism. William McKinley is going to be the one that kind of steps us out in the world, stretches our boundaries. So he is not an isolationist. He does not say, let's just stay at home. He's one that says, let's go plant our flag all over the world. Well, his Secretary of State writes something known as the Open Door Notes. Now, this is not on your notes, just this two. The Open Door Notes was a focus on China as a trade partner. He says we must maintain a relationship with China. China must be kept open because we want them as a market to sell our goods. McKinley, being pro-business, is in favor of keeping all markets open. Another thing about his imperialism is he's going to lead America into the Spanish-American War. That is on your notes. So let's talk about the Spanish-American War. This is what you can write down. Now, when we say the Spanish-American War, it is the United States versus Spain. However, it is not fought in the country of Spain. It's fought in Spanish holdings in the Caribbean. So it's fought in Cuba and on, in Pacific Ocean territories. And I'm going to list out all the islands here in just a second. Remember the Maine was the rallying cry for the Spanish-American War. So you might notice that we've remembered several things already in our history. We've had to remember the Alamo, and you may think forward that we're going to remember Pearl Harbor. We're going to remember the Lusitania. We're going to remember September 11th. Well, in this case, this era of history, the rallying event was the explosion of the Uss Maine, and I'm briefly going to tell you the story of that right here. So the Uss Maine, it was a U.S. naval ship that was sent to Cuba to be a presence, okay? Sometimes the thing about the Navy, I'm an Army guy and I like to pick at the Navy, but sometimes the thing about the Navy is having a Navy means that you don't need to use your Navy. Because you have the Navy, other countries aren't going to attack you. So the joke is sometimes the Navy doesn't get used, but the point is we have a Navy. So the USS Maine got sent to Cuba as a presence. Well, it's kind of muddled as to what actually happened, but what definitely happens is that it explodes. The muddled piece of it is, was it an accident kind of caused by, negligence on the part of the sailors? Or was it an attack done by Spanish mercenary soldiers? We'll never know. It could have been an accident in the ammunition room, right? If they did something wrong in the ammunition room, there's a spark, there's a boom, we blow up our own ship accidentally. But given between the two options, what option do you think that President McKinley went with, given the tensions of the era? Huh?
They got bombed.
They attacked us. Yeah, there's that us versus them idea. They attacked us. So was that totally true? We'll never really know. Honestly, we'll never really know for sure. I'm sure that there's plenty of reading out there that talks about both sides. But what happens is that the headline says USS Maine attacked, American interests attacked, let's go to war. And something about this era, there's this thing called yellow journalism, which is sensationalist headlines for the purpose of selling newspapers. Can you imagine the media over-exaggerating a particular story for the purpose of selling their product, be it a newspaper or a magazine or these days a television show? Can you imagine that? The media over-sensationalize? Yeah, of course we can imagine that. It happens all the time these days. Well, this era, it was called yellow because the paper that it was printed on was actually kind of a cheaper brand of newspaper. So yellow journalism, not quite tabloids, but definitely not quite respectable journalism either. So the newspaper men of the day really grabbed onto the explosion of the USS Maine. And in a way, the media drove the country to war. Because of the sensationalism of the USS Maine, remember the Maine, the media and their coverage of it kind of drove the US to war. And that's kind of something to keep your eye on in the present day. Are we getting the right message? Are we getting true facts? Or is the media trying to sell something? In this case, of course, it cost Americans going to war, and it had political implications. We expanded our imperialist policies because of what the media was feeding Americans. But there was a large American support, right? Everyone was in favor of going to get those nasty Spaniards, and that's why we have the Spanish-American War. So USA versus Spain, like I said, it was fought in Cuba and on various islands on the Pacific Ocean. Keynote about the Spanish-American War is that it brings to us Colonel Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders. So I say it's featuring, is that how the kids say it? You guys have songs, it's like Kesha featuring Pitbull or vice versa, something like that. Featuring, Jordan's smiling at me, thank you. Featuring Colonel Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders. So let me introduce you to Colonel Teddy Roosevelt. Now, first of all, what I'm wearing today is a really cool hoodie, printed hoodie of Theodore Roosevelt's Rough Rider uniform. You can see on the collar here it says USA. Okay, I think it says V, USV, United States Volunteers. That's what the moniker is. And you can see from his from the picture there, it does kind of look like his particular outfit. So I got a handful of these hoodies that I like to wear during class. Let me introduce you to Teddy Roosevelt, the Colonel. At the outbreak of the war, he was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He resigns his position as Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Okay, that's an office job. That's not something where he's going to find himself on the front lines. I think he had a genuine motivation, and he also had kind of an understanding of the political landscape. His genuine motivation was he wanted to go fight the Spaniards and protect America. His political motivation was he realized that this season of war could help him gain fame and notoriety. And we've seen it before. When someone becomes famous because of their military exploits, what can they do next? Largely anything they want. Who is a military man who became president probably because of his fighting? Well, George Washington is a great start. Andrew Jackson, very notable as well, right? William Henry Harrison. Jackson likes to rip off all the ones that we don't even talk about in class. That's good. We've seen military men rise to the office because of what they've done in war. So was that his biggest motivation? I don't think so. Okay, I think he was a genuine patriot and he wanted to fight and serve American interests. But does he know that it could be an opportunity for him? Yes. I think he knows that as well. Here's what he does. You could not do this today. He resigns his position and he raises a volunteer force. And his volunteer force becomes known as the Rough Riders. They're cavalry. Cavalry means they ride horses and they do their swashbuckling with their sabers. You can't do that today. I can't quit my job and raise a group of fighting men called Swanson swashbucklers and go to Afghanistan. Can't do that. It doesn't work like that today. But at the time, when we needed to build a force, they're like, all right, Roosevelt, here's we'll make you a colonel. And we're going to give you some equipment, and you go fight them Spaniards over in Cuba. That's exactly what happened. He raises his own force. They get this sweet nickname called the Rough Riders. Here they are. What kind of men do you see in this picture?
Wow.
Old, middle-aged. What else? What's the attribute you see, right?
Country. Why?
Tough old guys.
Tough old guys, countrymen. White is a fair observation. They are all Caucasian, rough around the edges. These are some fighting men. All right, these are some guys that have been twisting barbed wire and wrangling cattle. And hey, here's a war. Let's go fight. These are some rough dudes. They become very famous in one particular battle called the Battle of San Juan Hill, where they are known for storming up this particular hill in the city of San Juan and They will forever be known as the Rough Riders who conquered San Juan Hill. One battle, kind of like for all of Theodore Roosevelt's legacy, he wins this one particular battle. This is not photography, but a portrait, of course. This adds to his legacy. Theodore Roosevelt, the colonel, adds to his legacy. And of course, we know he becomes president. So it's one of those things where the military makes his legacy, feeds his legacy. Question?
What are all the horses like? Did they die?
What, the horses?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes horses die in battle. That's true. Sometimes. But they went from the port, I think the port in Florida to Cuba. They put their horses on the ships. They sailed across that 90 miles of ocean, and they arrived in Cuba. They have their little staging base, and then it comes to time to go into battle. They're rough riders. Like, they knew how to handle their horses. They knew how to fight a battle. So plenty more history about the Rough Riders. That's as much as I have time for today. Want to give you a little bit more about Theodore Roosevelt, the colonel. He was an avid reader. Okay, very important. I think it's very important to know he's a very avid reader. Readers are leaders, leaders are readers. He was an outdoorsman. That's not hard to understand because he was a Rough Rider. Here's something. Here's the page you see on the screen there. This is from well before the Spanish-American War, which was in 1898. This is about 14 years before that. This is his personal journal, his personal diary. And Madison, what did he write on Thursday, February 14th, 1884? The light has gone out of my life. On that day, his first wife and his mother both died. Separate incidents, like it wasn't like a single car crash. They both died of disease on the exact same day. So what I give to you is this: he was not immune to personal hardship. Just as we saw the Lincolns lose children, just as we've seen other key leaders have difficulties in their personal lives, just because he's this big baller shot caller doesn't mean he's immune to personal hardship. And that's very formative to him. Okay, those two women, his first wife and his mother, were very formative to him in his youth. And that's something he kind of carried with him for the rest of his life as well. So just want to let you know that we all have some difficulties in our lives, and these big leaders aren't immune to that as well. He's also known as the Bull Moose, and I'm going to tell you more about that a little bit later as well. Got to hurry up here. All right. Remember the main rally cry featuring Teddy Roosevelt. Moving on. So here's the results. Do write this down. Write this down under the Spanish-American War. The results are that the U.S. wins. What do we win? Well, some of the fighting happened in these Pacific Ocean islands of the Philippines. We get the Philippines. We get Guam. We get Puerto Rico. And Cuba becomes what is known as a U.S. protectorate. We did not gain Cuba. Okay, it's not a territory. It's not a future state. Obviously, we know that. But we got to protect Cuba for the next couple of decades. And of course, we're going to have a very interesting relationship with Cuba going forward. But Cuba becomes a U.S. protectorate. The Philippines, we're going to talk about that in a second. Guam is a U.S. territory to this day. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory to this day. So that is and you can also see, look at the red boxes on the map, it's pretty far spread out. So when we fought wars so far, we fought on our homeland. We fought to protect our own interests on our own soil. These wars were a little bit harder for the American public to fully understand. You mean my son is going to go to the Philippine Islands to fight for America? You mean my son is going to get on a ship and go to Guam to protect Mississippi? It's a little bit harder for people to understand because we're spread so far out. It wasn't about protecting the home soil as much as it was about spreading the American way of life. This is imperialism. Okay, so the fact you see how far spread out those are, this is imperialism. These are the results of the Spanish-American War. Secretary of State John Hay called it a splendid little war. Contrast that with what William Tecumseh Sherman said about war. What did Sherman say about war, Fatima?
What, Sherman?
Sherman. What did Sherman say about war? Somebody, Eric. War is hell. So John Hay, I don't think he ever been shot at a day in his life, right? Because there ain't no such thing as a splendid little war. And I think that is kind of an unfortunate, phrasing for especially for those who fought, bled, died. There's no such thing as a splendid little war. A little bit more about the Philippines there. We did not acquire the Philippines as in like we gained the territory. We technically purchased it. But we got to purchase it because we were fighting Spain. Spain was like, hey, all right, listen, stop fighting. buy this territory from us and we'll just all be done. So it was one of those situations where we didn't necessarily conquer it, we did purchase it. And we are, unfortunately, we're still going to have some difficulties in the Philippines we're going to talk about in a second. The big takeaway in all of this is that the United States has now become an imperial power. Just like that map shows, we're now spread out all across the country. All right, sad story about William McKinley. He's shot. He's assassinated. This is how we get to Theodore Roosevelt, the president. William McKinley is assassinated by an anarchist. The story of his assassination is this. I went all in on Abraham Lincoln. I'm not going to reenact McKinley. But this young man who was an anarchist, he believed, now his beliefs were a little warped, but he believed McKinley was pro-business and anti-labor. He believed that McKinley was for the rich people and not for the laborers. So, well, naturally, that means McKinley deserves to die, right? A warped perspective on what happened there. We got to understand, this is still before the Secret Service, right? You guys are like, how many presidents is it going to take before we get Secret Service? It's actually going to be because of McKinley's assassination that we get the Secret Service. Here's what happens on that day. He's at the World's Fair in Buffalo. He's shaking hands, greeting people. Okay, this is very normal for the president to do at this time. This young man comes right up to him. He's got a drape over his right hand. And what do you think he's concealing? A weapon, a gun. McKinley, he said, we know this because he says it later. He doesn't die instantly. But McKinley says, I thought he was covering a wound. So I reached out to him with my left hand. He's going to shake his left hand. Sometimes you do that awkward little left hand shake, right? Well, McKinley, again, still thinking this is a kind young man who's supporting him, reaches out with his left hand, and this guy, bang, 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 shoots him twice. Shoots him once in the gut, and I think once in the lungs. McKinley does not die instantly. He does die 8 days later. He actually does not die from the bullet wound. He dies from the gangrene that gets inside the bullet wound. So modern medicine, he would not have died, right? Modern medicine, he would have survived. Gangrene is basically an infection delaying. They were unable to take the bullet out of his wound. Medicine wasn't quite what it is today, and he died from the infection inside of that bullet wound. So because he's assassinated, we do get the Secret Service from it, but we also get Theodore Roosevelt, the president. Oh. So let me introduce you to, hey, he's a bull moose of a man. He's a strong, articulate, in charge kind of guy. Let me introduce you to Theodore Roosevelt, the politician. So he starts off as this following, and these are, I'm going to throw some facts at you, and then of course your notes have some labels for you to put down. Following his time as Theodore Roosevelt, the colonel, he becomes the governor of New York. He was put up as a Republican candidate for governor because they believed he could kind of fix some corruption that was in New York, right? That was his reputation. He was a go-getter. Look at that smile. Look at those jowls. Like, he's definitely a go-getter. He's going to fix New York. Well, as governor of New York, he demonstrates some very aggressive, progressive beliefs. And since that rhymes, you'll never forget it. Aggressive, progressive beliefs. Republicans start to sour on him a little bit. They're like, ooh, this guy is a little bit more aggressive than we want him to be. I know how we can get rid of him. This is the Republicans talking. How do you think you get rid of a politician? Impeachment is a good thought. That's not exactly it.
Give him another position.
Give him another position. What is the least powerful position? Is correct. What is the least powerful position in U.S. politics? Senator, the position of vice president. How do we get rid of him? Make him the vice president. Have you ever heard of certain VPs? You have not. So it's kind of a joke. Obviously, that person is one heartbeat away from the presidency, but it is considered the least powerful position in U.S. politics. So how do we get rid of Roosevelt? Make him vice president. Guess what? Plot twist. McKinley is shot. He becomes president. So the Republicans were trying to get rid of him, and of course, he goes on to become a very important president. Theodore Roosevelt. So he's the VP turned president. He's actually, to this day, is the youngest man to become president at age 42. So I'm not there yet. I suppose I could still be younger, but he is the youngest man turned president, not the youngest person elected president. JFK will be elected at age 43. He becomes president not by election, but by the assassination, right? He's known for his progressive policies, and this is what we're going to talk about today. So the square deal is that, the politicians always like to package it, right? The square deal has 3 parts, and they're all C's. So Jackson, just like what? Something that starts with all the same letter?
3 eyes.
Just like a good Baptist preacher, right? We were at church this Sunday, and Pastor Ron had the 3 M's. What was it?
It was spectator, dictator.
That's right. But I think he also had the 3 P's.
Something else.
Anyway, Pastor Ron, we listened. I swear that we did. Just like a good Baptist preacher, his square deal is 3 parts, and they all start with C. And for you, history students, that should make it more memorable. So let's talk about all of those things. First one is conservation. And by the picture on the screen, what do you think conservation suggests?
Water.
Water.
Pollution.
Huh?
Pollution.
Anti-pollution, right? Eric said pollution, anti-pollution. What are we trying to conserve?
The land.
The land. Gracie, I love it. Thank you from the left field over there. Conservation is a movement that put laws in place to protect our lands and resources. We're talking about forests, water, and natural reserves. Theodore Roosevelt is considered a champion of the National Park Service because his legislation helped create certain national parks such as Yosemite and Yellowstone and many, many, many others. Has anybody ever been to a national park of any sort? Now, I'm not saying Theodore Roosevelt created all of them, but he was a champion of conservation and the National Parks Service. So I'll give you a second to get that written down. That logo you see on the screen there is the NPS logo, okay, the National Park Service. There are national parks that are not just nature-based. In fact, one of them is in Oklahoma City. The Oklahoma City bombing memorial site is a part of NPS. So it's not exactly the acres and acres and acres of land that you might think of for a normal natural park, but it does fall under having a park ranger at the site. This is my buddy Eric. And I met Eric when last time I visited Oklahoma City. My dad and I went and visited the memorial, and you guys know a little bit, I think, my personal story with the Oklahoma City bombing. Well, I got to talking to Eric, and I'm pretty familiar with the story of the Oklahoma City bombing. So we talked about that a little bit. But then I said, hey, Eric, from Oklahoma, but now I teach in Georgia. I teach U.S. history, and there's a class where we talk about Theodore Roosevelt and conservation and NPS. Do you have a story that I can tell my class that's a little bit more not mainstream, a story they might not have heard yet? He said, boy, do I ever. And here's the story he told me. He said let me give my notes. In 1903, March 14th, 1903, President Theodore Roosevelt wrote a letter to the president of what is known as the Sierra Club. And that man was John Muir. The Sierra Club was kind of the forerunner to the national parks. And Roosevelt was very interested in learning more about conservation, learning more about the West. We're getting very crowded on the East Coast. We've talked about how we're moving out west. We've talked about the Indians. We've talked about the railroad, of course. Roosevelt is at this point of realizing if we don't protect what